My name is Marian Ellis. I'm 63 years old. That afternoon, sunlight drifted through the blinds of my bedroom, striping the bed in gold. I was holding up a pale blue dress against the mirror, simple, soft, the kind of color that made me feel calm. Ellen had said it brought out my eyes. Marcy insisted it looked classy enough for Charleston. They were sitting on the edge of the bed, sipping coffee and arguing about shoes when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't look. We'd been trading messages all morning about Lila's wedding schedule. Small details only mothers think about seating charts. Centerpieces. Weather forecasts. My daughter's name flashed across the screen, and I smiled before I even opened it. Then I read the words, "Don't come to the wedding. You and your friends just make everything awkward. I don't want you there." For a moment, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe she meant to send it to someone else. My thumb hovered over the screen, but then the group chat lit up laughing emojis, a meme of someone being thrown out of a party, and a line from one of her bridesmaids. "Good call, Lila." My breath left me all at once. I didn't say a word. Ellen was still laughing about a story from work. Marcy was holding a shoe up to the light. The room seemed to tilt, voices fading into the kind of silence that hums inside your chest. I sat down on the edge of the bed and read the message again. Each time, the letters felt sharper. I had paid the deposits for that venue, the florist, the car rental. I'd spent weekends driving to Charleston just to help because Lila was too busy building her brand. I never asked for thanks, just a seat at the ceremony, a chance to be her mother. Now I wasn't even welcome in the room. Ellen finally noticed my face and set her cup down. "Marian, what is it?" I turned the phone toward her. She read it once and whispered something I barely heard. I just nodded, pressing the phone to my chest. For the first time in my life, I couldn't tell whether my heart was breaking or waking up. Outside, the afternoon light flickered across the blue dress, and I realized I wouldn't be wearing it to my daughter's wedding after all. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own thoughts breathing. I sat in the kitchen with the porch light spilling across the tile and thought about how we got here, how a message like that could come from my own child. Lila had always been sharp, ambitious, the kind of girl who wanted her name on things. When her father left, she was 12 and furious at everything, especially me. I worked mornings at the library and evenings at a grocery store, trying to keep us afloat. She didn't see the hours I traded for her dance lessons, her school trips, her college fund. She only saw what I couldn't give her brand names: polished ease, a bigger house. When she got her degree in business, I cried in the back row. Later, when her first event company struggled, I co-signed the loan just until things stabilize, she said. Voice sweet, but practiced. They never really did. Each time she called, I reached for my checkbook before she finished asking. It wasn't generosity anymore, it was habit. Somewhere along the way, gratitude turned into expectation. She started calling Ellen and Marcy the wine club ladies like a joke that wasn't funny. When she hosted dinners, she'd introduce me to her clients as my mom. "She's retired," as if that explained everything she didn't want to say. Now, with that one text, I could finally see the shape of what I'd built. Every favor, every payment, every quiet yes had bought me less of her love and more of her distance. I set my mug down, the sound small but final, and knew something had to give this time. It wouldn't be me. By morning, the shock had cooled into something quieter, like the still air after a storm. I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the group chat again, though I already knew every word. They had kept talking long after I went silent. A stream of laughing emojis, inside jokes, and a meme of a woman being pushed out of a wedding aisle. The kind of cruelty that hides behind humor. My thumb hovered over the screen for a moment before I pressed delete chat. The message disappeared, but the sting stayed. I set the phone face down and looked at the half-empty cup of coffee beside me. The bitterness felt oddly fitting. Ellen stopped by around 10, holding a box of pastries, and that look only old friends have, the kind that reads your silence. You don't have to keep pretending, Marion, she said softly. You paid for half that wedding. Honey, maybe it's time you use your half. Her voice wasn't angry, just steady, and that steadiness anchored me. I laughed, a small, tired sound that surprised us both. Use my half, I repeated, as if the words themselves carried weight. After she left, I walked to the bedroom, opened the closet, and looked at the blue dress again. It hung there like a question I no longer needed to answer. For years, I'd lived by the rule that keeping peace was worth any price. But peace, I was beginning to realize, shouldn't feel this much like silence. I closed the closet door, straightened the hem of my sweater, and sat down at my desk. The venue contract was in my name. My credit card had paid the deposit. I stared at the paperwork until the decision settled deep in my chest, steady, unshakable. I was done being useful. The call came just after lunch. I recognized the Charleston area code before I answered. Mrs. Ellis, this is Dana from Magnolia Hall, the voice said, polite and uncertain. Someone from your party tried to complete the final payment, but the card didn't go through. Since you're listed as the primary on the contract, I wanted to check before we proceed. I felt a strange calm wash over me. I see, I said, keeping my tone even. Just to be clear, if I wanted to cancel the reservation, could I? There was a pause on the line, the kind that holds more understanding than words. Yes, ma'am, she said finally. You're the contract holder. You can cancel at any time. My fingers tightened around the phone. Then please do. Dana hesitated only a second. Would you like confirmation by email? Yes, I said. And Dana, thank you. After I hung up, I sat very still, listening to the faint tick of the kitchen clock. I expected guilt to creep in, or maybe panic, but there was nothing. Just a quiet space where fear used to live. The email arrived within minutes, event cancellation confirmed. I read it once, twice, and then smiled for the first time in days. I opened another tab and typed an address I hadn't visited in years, the Savannah Women's Shelter. They hosted annual fundraisers, but had recently lost their venue after budget cuts. By the next morning, I had rebooked the same date, October 19th, under a new name, Community Luncheon for Single Mothers. Dana's reply was simple. Happy to help. Mrs. Ellis. I spent the afternoon calling Ellen and Marcy, asking if they'd like to help with decorations. They didn't ask questions, just said yes. When I hung up, the house felt lighter, almost buoyant. I looked out the window at the fading sky and whispered to myself, let's see what dignity looks like. For the first time in a long while, the words didn't sound like a wish. They sounded like a plan. By Thursday, the group chat came alive again. This time, it wasn't laughter, it was panic. Lila's messages appeared one after another, fast and frantic. Why did the venue say our date is gone? Then another. Someone must have made a mistake. Can anyone call them? The bridesmaids sent question marks. The planner tagged me directly, but I didn't reply. I turned off notifications, set the phone on the counter, and went back to trimming ribbons for the luncheon centerpieces outside. Savannah rain began to fall steady, soft. The kind that blurs edges and quiets everything it touches. The sound filled the room as I arranged white hydrangeas into mason jars. Ellen was coming by later to help wrap silverware. We'd chosen light blue napkins, the same shade as the dress I'd meant to wear to the wedding. The florist called once, then twice. I let it ring. Dana from Magnolia Hall emailed to confirm that the new event's deposit had cleared. I thanked her and shut the laptop. By evening, my phone was still buzzing across the counter, screen lighting up with unread messages. Lila, her fiancé, even my ex-husband. I didn't open any of them. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching rain pool along the curb for years. I had tried to fix everything, to soothe, to pay, to explain. Now, silence did the talking for me. It wasn't cruel. It was clean, like the air after a storm. Some lessons, I thought, only sink in when the noise finally stops. The call came just after sunset. I almost didn't answer, but habit still had a way of pulling me toward her name. Mom. Lila's voice trembled, soft at first, then tightening into control. Everything's gotten out of hand. I didn't mean for things to sound that way. I leaned back in my chair, watching the porch light flicker against the wet glass. You didn't mean to tell me not to come to your wedding. She sighed. It was a joke. Mom, you know how group chats are. I was stressed, and the girls, well, they overreacted. It's just been chaos. I didn't mean to hurt you. Her tone was too smooth, too familiar. It was the same voice she used when asking for a loan or a favor, the one that dressed guilt up as charm. I didn't interrupt. I just let the silence sit. Then she tried again. The payment issue, the venue, it's all gotten so confusing. I'm sure there's been a mix-up. We can fix it if you just, Lila, I said quietly. Was I invited or not? The words stopped her cold. There was a pause, a small catch of breath. Then came the excuses. Tumbling fast stress, misunderstanding, pressure from her fiancé's family. Finally, tears. I didn't want it to be like this. She whispered. Neither did I. She started to say something else, but I cut her off. My voice steady. I'll believe you when your actions match your words. Then I ended the call. The house was silent again, except for the soft patter of rain easing against the windows. I stood there for a moment, phone still in my hand, before setting it down beside the lamp. Later that night, a text arrived from David. I get it. He wrote, nothing else. For the first time in years, I believed him. 2 weeks later, the wedding took place anyway. Just not the one anyone had imagined. I wasn't there, of course. But Savannah has a way of carrying stories faster than the tide. By Sunday morning, I'd already seen the photos. I'd seen a low-budget banquet hall off the highway, folding chairs dressed in wrinkled white covers, and a sagging banner that read, Love Always Wins. The weather had turned thick and restless that evening. The kind of Charleston humidity that clings to skin and wilts flowers before the first toast. The cake melted along the edges. Guests fanned themselves with napkins. Someone had forgotten to rent a sound system, so music came from a single portable speaker that kept cutting in and out. Lila's smile, in every picture, looked stretched wide but brittle. Her new husband, Blake, stared into the distance in half the shots, like he was already somewhere else. Later, I learned what the photos didn't show. An ex-girlfriend had arrived unexpectedly, a guest of one of the groom's friends. During the bouquet toss, she caught it by accident. They said, and then, in front of everyone, shouted that Blake had still been texting her just 2 weeks before the wedding. Someone filmed it. Of course they did. The clip made its way to social media before the night ended. A short, shaky video of Lila storming out in her dress, mascara streaking down her cheeks. By morning, the vendors were demanding final payments, and half the guests had untagged themselves from her posts. I saw the pictures again later that day when David stopped by. He didn't say anything at first, just set his phone on the table. Screen turned toward me. I looked, then looked away. You didn't ruin it, he said quietly. You just stopped saving it. We sat there for a while, neither of us needing to fill the silence. Through the open window, cicadas hummed in the warm night air, somewhere across the marsh. Thunder rolled, low and distant. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for what had fallen apart. There was nothing left for me to repair. I poured 2 glasses of sweet tea, handed one to David, and watched the rain start again over the city that had seen too much pretending. What broke that night wasn't the wedding. It was the illusion that had held it together. Weeks passed before I saw David again. He called one Sunday morning, his voice quiet but steady. Mind if I stop by late afternoon? The light was soft over the marsh, that warm savanna glow that makes everything look like forgiveness. He arrived carrying a paper bag from a local bakery and 2 cups of coffee. We sat on the back porch, the boards creaking under our chairs, watching herons skim the water's edge. For a while, neither of us spoke. The air smelled of salt and late summer. Finally, he said, "They blamed you for everything. You know, the venue, the guests leaving, even the weather. Lila said you wanted to humiliate her." I looked down at my cup, at my "Did you tell her she's wrong?" "I told her you were the only adult in the room," he said. I told them all. It was such a simple sentence, but it landed deep. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear it from anyone, but especially from him. He leaned back, sighing. "You did the right thing. Marion, you gave too much for too long. Sometimes people need to lose comfort before they see its worth." The sky shifted pink and gold. We watched the tide pull the light away from the reeds, and for a moment, the silence between us felt like understanding. When he left, he squeezed my hand, a gesture that said more than words ever could. After his car disappeared down the street, I sat there a little longer, the empty chair beside me catching the last bit of sun. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. It took less than a month for the silence to break. The email came on a Thursday morning. Polite and almost professional. "Hi, Mom. I know we haven't spoken much, but things have been a little tight. Could you help? Just this once, there was no mention of the wedding, no apology, just the same soft tone she used every time she wanted something." I stared at the message for a long while. My coffee went cold beside me. Then I opened my banking app and began making changes. One by one, I canceled the auto payments I'd set up over the years, her phone plan, the car insurance she still hadn't transferred, the small loan I'd been covering quietly. The list seemed endless, like a record of all the times I'd mistaken enabling for love. That afternoon, I called the phone company and removed my card. The woman on the line asked if I wanted to keep the number active. "No," I said gently, "not anymore." By evening, the calls started first from Lila, then from her fiancé, then from numbers I didn't recognize. I let them ring. The sound filled the house like distant thunder, familiar, but no longer frightening. When I finally answered, her voice cracked through the static. "Mom, they're saying the phone's been cut off. The payment's what's going on." I kept my tone calm. "You wanted independence," I said. "Now you have it." There was a pause. A tiny gasp on the other end. Then the line went quiet. I hung up before she could find another excuse. Afterward, I stood by the window, watching the marsh darken with the tide. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my tea, but the shaking wasn't from guilt anymore. It was something else release. Maybe, for the first time, my boundaries held, and the world didn't fall apart. Spring came early that year. The azaleas bloomed along the sidewalks of Drayton Street before March had even finished, painting the city in pink and white. I spent the morning moving chairs out onto the porch, arranging tables beneath the oak tree, and setting vases filled with hydrangeas. By noon, the house smelled of lemon cake and coffee. The charity luncheon had become something real, a small, steady tradition. The first one I'd hosted had barely filled the dining room. This time, the yard was alive with voices. Women from the shelter mingled with local volunteers, laughter spilling out through the open windows. Ellen arrived carrying a bouquet wrapped in brown paper and kissed my cheek before setting it down by the door. "They're from my garden," she said. "Figured they'd look better here than in a vase at home." I smiled and tucked one of the flowers into her hair. "You're right," I said. "They do." For the first time in years, the house didn't feel too quiet. Every sound, the clink of dishes, the low hum of conversation, the wind moving through the magnolia branches felt like it belonged. When the last guests left, I stood by the porch railing, watching the sunlight fade into a soft, golden haze. Across the street, the lamplights flickered on. I reached for the switch beside the door and turned on my own porch light, the same one I used to keep burning on nights when Lila said she might stop by. I'd left it on for years, waiting through holidays, birthdays, all those long drives from Charleston that never happened. The bulb glowed warm against the twilight. I leaned against the railing and let the quiet settle in. "This light isn't for waiting anymore," I said softly. "It's for peace." Behind me, the house still carried traces of laughter, Ellen's voice, the faint scent of coffee, the echo of something mended rather than lost. As darkness settled over Drayton Street, the light stayed on, steady and calm. For once, I wasn't leaving it for anyone else. It was mine.